Hi, I'm Kirby Allison, and in today's video, I'm going to review some of the upcoming trunk shows of London's finest tailors, shirt makers, and shoemakers. Of course, one of my favorite things about London is the fact that as far as the well-dressed gentleman is concerned, everything he would ever need can be found. Tailors, shirt makers, shoemakers, you name it, the best are simply based in London. Everything I love about quality craftsmanship and tradition, and especially clothing, is epitomized by these heritage firms that continue to do their work quietly and discreetly the same way today that they have for decades, even generations. Not only are they making the best clothes, but they also offer the best experience. But for those of us that aren't able to make it to London to visit these makers personally, they travel to the United States quite often on trunk shows. So in today's video, I thought it'd be fun to run through a list of these upcoming trunk shows and talk a little bit about what I find interesting about each one of these makers. So first up, we have the London Collective. Now this is a little bit of a group. We have Bud Shirtmakers, E.B. Meyrowitz, Gaziano Girling, and Edward Sexton, all teaming together to coordinate their U.S. trunk show dates. Now, the beauty of the London Collective is that they're all coordinated together. So you can go visit the London Collective as a group, knock out your shoes, your shirts, your tailoring, your eyeglasses. It's really a one-stop shop that makes it easier to see multiple makers at the same time. Now, of course, Bud Shirtmakers, located in the Piccadilly Arcade, is best known as really kitting out all of London for black tie and white tie. Of course, they're very well known for their bespoke shirts, all cut on premises in London on the Piccadilly Arcade, and is really doing some of the finest work. Gaziano Girling, of course, is no stranger to anyone that watches this channel. Tony Gaziano and Dean Girling really are responsible for being the first new shoemaker to really update that classic London aesthetic. Not only do they have absolutely exceptional factory-made Goodyear welted dress shoes, but they do some of the finest bespoke work out there. And with Tony and Dean back in the bespoke business, it's a rare opportunity to really have shoes made by two legendary makers. E.B. Meyrowitz, located in the Royal Arcade, does bespoke eyeglasses, again at the highest level from various different materials. If you're someone that loves spectacles or sunglasses, they are certainly someone to take a look at. And finally, Edward Sexton, of course, who was a cutter with Tommy Nutter during the era when they really revolutionized Savile Row and started cutting for the Beatles. So Edward Sexton today, much in that vein, has a very fashion-forward but classically English aesthetic. So an interesting group here. Their dates for the United States are March 31st through April 14th. It's quite a long trip. They'll be visiting Los Angeles, Dallas, Chicago, Washington, D.C., and New York. And then in addition, Bud Shirtmakers will be breaking off to visit Boston, San Francisco, and Philadelphia. Next up is Kent and Haste. One of the interesting things about Kent and Haste is that John Kent was the cutter of the late Duke of Edinburgh. They do absolutely fantastic work. I kind of joke in our tour, or we actually filmed a video with them. One of the things I joke about is that they're in many ways the lowest common denominator. They are the tailor to some of the best dressed men in London that I know. Tom Chamberlain, Nick Fowkes, a good U.S. congressman that's a good friend of mine, and several other notable characters all go to Kent and Haste. They're located just around the corner from Savile Row, so they're technically off the row, which allows them to have a very competitive price point. But these two gentlemen, John Kent and Terry Haste, are two of the most experienced cutters that I've ever come across and have an absolutely phenomenal product. They're certainly two people that we look forward to working with more in the future. We filmed a tour with them. If you haven't seen that, check out the link in the description of this video. They'll be visiting New York and Palm Beach April 1st through April 5th. Of course, for more information about their trunk shows, take a look at their website. Next, we have Dege Skinner. They will be traveling throughout the United States in April. They don't have their dates pinned down yet, but they'll be visiting Washington, D.C., Middleborough, and Philadelphia. One of the interesting things about Dege Skinner is that they are one of the most historic Savile Row-based tailoring firms, and it's one of the few ones that are still family-run and operated. William Skinner is a consummate gentleman, and they do absolutely fantastic work. Their work is steeped in the tradition of Savile Row, and no question, they do tailoring at the absolute highest level. Next, we have Tom Mahone at Redmayne, of course, a good friend of mine. He is well known for the work that he did at English Cut. Now he's at Redmayne. Tom Mahone was trained at Anderson & Shepherd and carries that drape cut tradition forward. He will be visiting the United States March 28th through April 5th and visiting Los Angeles, San Francisco, Atlanta, Boston, and New York. Up next, we have Huntsman Sons, again, another firm that we've done a lot of filming with. Ed Turco and Ralph Fitzgerald run the New York-based cutting room. Huntsman was really on the cutting edge in opening up that cutting room before the lockdowns of COVID. And what is great about their New York-based cutting room is it really extends that Savile Row experience into the United States in a very real way. If you're traveling to New York, you can go visit them personally, but also it allows them to travel more frequently throughout the United States. Ralph Fitzgerald, the cutter, is exceptionally talented and a good friend, and then Ed Turco is one of the most knowledgeable characters in this industry I've ever met. Now, they will be traveling throughout the United States, of course, regularly. Visit their website for all the specific travel dates and details. But specifically, February 22nd through 25th, they'll be visiting Houston, Dallas, and Austin. March 9th through the 11th, they'll be visiting San Francisco and Los Angeles. And March 21st through the 25th, they'll be visiting Washington, D.C. and Boston. Now, one of the great things about the Huntsman group in New York, of course, is that everything is cut in New York, but still made on Savile Row. So again, it's an authentic, bona fide Savile Row made garment, made just like if you were having it measured in London on Savile Row, but you have the extension of the service of having a local-based team. Next is Stephen Hitchcock. We just released a video on the channel. It was our first time to film with Stephen. Of course, anyone that is following Savile Row tailors will know of Stephen. His father, John Hitchcock, was the most recent head cutter of Anderson & Shepherd, and so it's no surprise that Stephen, kind of cutting in his father's tradition, really cuts a classic drape cut. Now, what I like about Stephen is that he has certainly updated this a little bit. He's added a side panel, and so although it is still a very soft drape cut, it still retains quite a bit of shape. In our most recent video with him, he goes through a lot of the intricate details of how he approaches his craft, so make sure you check that out. He'll be visiting the United States January 30th through February 8th, New York, Washington, D.C., and Los Angeles, and then he'll be back May 17th through May 24th, hitting those same cities. And finally, Henry Poole. Henry Poole was the first Savile Row-based bespoke tailoring firm, and so they really kind of helped define the entire nature of that street. Simon has taken over from his father, Angus, who was an absolute legendary tailor. Of course, we've got a ton of content that we filmed with them. You can view all that. Check the description of this video to all of our content with these great makers. Now, a great question that we get asked often is how do you choose amongst such talented tailors? The reality is that there's so many really talented bespoke tailors out of London that are doing work at the highest level. How does one choose amongst them all? And I would just reference you back to our videos. At the end of the day, it's finding a tailor that you get along with, whose work you like. Each house style has a slightly different cut, so you want to get to know that a little bit. But the best way is to really visit with each tailor individually. And so these trunk shows are a great opportunity to do that. Of course, the best and most up-to-date information for all these tailors can be accessed on their websites. We talk a little bit about the differences between house styles in our Savile Row walking tour, another great video and favorite of mine on this channel. Next up, let's talk a little bit about bespoke shirt makers. I've got two on this list that are absolute favorites of mine. Let's start with Wil Whiting. Now, Wil is part of this new generation of bespoke tailors and shirt makers that, again, is redefining the industry. Wil, we've done a lot of content with him that you can see on this channel, has just an absolutely incredible attention to detail. Wil is highly technical in his approach, and I think is doing pattern work, again, at the absolute highest level. I really hesitate to call anyone the best because all of these people that we work with are exceptionally talented at what they do, but Wil Whiting is certainly a formidable force out there, and his finishing, again, is amongst the best I've seen. He is one of the few English-based shirt makers to actually incorporate hand finishing into their product. Most of the English-based bespoke shirt makers have primarily a machine-made product, maybe with some hand finishing on the buttonholes, but Wil can take it from a fully machine-made product to a semi-hand finished product to a fully hand finished product. So if you're really into those nuanced details of quality craftsmanship and tradition, Wil is certainly someone to check out. He's going to be traveling to the United States March 2nd through 10th. He travels with Daniel Wiegand of Catella Shoemakers, and he's going to be visiting New York, Chicago, Austin, Dallas, San Francisco, and Los Angeles. So if you're interested in checking out Wil Whiting, visit his website, hit him up on Instagram, but he is an absolutely exceptionally talented shirt maker. Now, we spoke a little bit about Bud Shirtmakers earlier. They are part of the London Collective. Again, what's unique about Bud Shirtmakers, other than being one of those heritage houses based in central London, right on the Piccadilly Arcade, I mean, they are a cornerstone of that area, and they are outfitting men at the absolute highest level. But they do all of their pattern making and cutting right there on premises, on the Piccadilly Arcade. You can walk right upstairs. We've actually done it on this channel. And there you'll see their cutting team. They have 3 cutters that, again, are very senior, have been doing this for a long time, and make some absolutely exceptional shirts. Now, Bud, as I said, will be traveling as part of that London Collective here in the United States, March 31st through the 14th, visiting Dallas, Los Angeles, Chicago, Washington, D.C., New York, Boston, San Francisco, and Philadelphia. So they've got quite a bit of coverage in their U.S. trunk show. So last but not least, of course, are shoemakers. These are one of my favorite group of people in the world. As everyone on this channel knows, I have a passion for bespoke shoes, really all shoes for that matter. And bespoke, being that highest manifestation of the craft, is just really something absolutely beautiful. Now, I've got a few of the British-based bespoke shoemakers here. Of course, John Lobb, the original on St. James's, travels to the U.S. quite frequently. At the time of filming this video, they didn't have their U.S. trunk show dates released yet on their website, but check it out. They've got a brand new website that's beautifully well done. It is John Lobb 1849, and they also really very cutting edge for John Lobb, launched an Instagram account which has absolutely beautiful photography, and it's another really good way to stay up to date about what they're doing. So John Lobb actually travels to the United States, I believe, 4 or 5 times a year. So inquire through their website for their dates. Next, we have Gaziano Girling. Now, of course, Tony Gaziano, Dean Girling, iconic shoemakers. Tony, of course, known for his absolutely incredible aesthetic. He is an exceptionally talented last maker. And then Dean in the making. They started Gaziano and Girling back around the same time I started the Hanger Project in 2007, and really redefined the landscape for classic English-made dress shoes. Now, of course, bespoke being that highest incarnation of that is a beautiful representation of the craft, and Tony is now back in the business doing all the lasts himself. And so I really see it as an incredible opportunity to have a last made and a pair of shoes made by one of the most talented individuals in the craft right now. Now, Gaziano and Girling is traveling as part of the London Collective, March 31st through April 14th, hitting Los Angeles, Dallas, Chicago, D.C., and New York. Of course, you can find more information about that on the London Collective's website, but also, of course, Gaziano and Girling's website. And next up, we've got Daniel Wiegand of Catella Shoemaker, of course, the 2019 World Champion of Shoemaking, an absolutely exceptionally talented shoemaker. He travels with Wil Whiting. He's going to be visiting the United States March 2nd through 10th, hitting New York, Dallas, San Francisco, Los Angeles, and Chicago. Again, Daniel does work at the absolute highest level. I'm having a pair of shoes made by him right now. We've filmed several of the different parts of this process, and you can see all those videos on this channel. Another favorite shoemaker of mine, no stranger to someone that watches this channel, Dominic Casey. Of course, he is just a master craftsman and an all-around great guy. He'll be traveling to New York City only. He's got all of his dates booked out for the rest of the year. The upcoming ones are March 9th through 12th and June 8th through 11th. His book is quite full, so if you'd like to have a pair of shoes made by Dominic Casey, I'd suggest getting in touch with him as soon as possible. He's really quite unique in that he is one of the few shoemakers, Daniel being the other, that I know of that really do the entire process themselves, from the last making to the pattern making to the clicking to the actual making of the shoe. And so it's a rare opportunity to really get a pair of shoes made only by one person, only one set of hands touching those shoes, bench made, if you will, in the most technical sense. So Dominic Casey, huge fan of his. I have several pairs of his shoes. I'm actually picking up another pair the next time we go to London, and an exceptionally talented shoemaker. And last and not least, someone with whom we just filmed our first video with on this channel, but has been around for a long time, Nicholas Templeman. Nicholas Templeman, I think, was one of the first shoemakers to break out and really go independent. He was trained at John Lobb, and I think really makes his shoes in a way very consistent with the way that he was trained. I mean, he really, I think, does a great job really kind of carrying that approach forward. It's not very fussy. He uses the best makers, and there's a certain ease and elegance with which he approaches the craft that I have to say I really was struck by whenever we had an opportunity to film with him. Nicholas has been traveling to the United States consistently for a long time because, again, he has been an independent shoemaker for so many years. He doesn't have his dates pounded out quite yet, but he will be traveling to the United States in April and May, and he usually hits Washington, D.C., New York, Dallas, Houston, San Francisco, and Los Angeles. Of course, his website and Instagram account are the best ways to stay up to date about the cities that he will be visiting. So there we have it. That's my February trunk show roundup. This is a video that we hope to film a few times throughout the year just to keep everyone connected with the craft and to help all of you, of course, connect with those that we know are stewards of quality, craftsmanship, and tradition. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the comments section below. Give us a thumbs up. Make sure you subscribe to this channel. And then, of course, make sure you visit KirbyAllison.com, where we have the largest collection of luxury garment care, luxury shoe care accessories in the world, as well as other great clothing accessories. And then, of course, we have our new Patreon and YouTube channel memberships, just two more ways to support the content that we're filming here at Kirby Allison. Of course, I'm Kirby Allison, and I love to help the well-dressed acquire and care for their wardrobes while exploring the world of quality, craftsmanship, and tradition. Thanks for watching.